Dear viewers, wherever you are, hello and welcome to this new episode of your program, Spectra. Like the proverb says, we reap what our hands sow. So whatever kind of seed we put in the soil, whatever this seed will yield, whatever plant will come up, and the fruits of this plant will be very similar to the kind of seed that we put. If we put a sweet seed, then the fruits will be sweet. If we put a bitter seed, then the fruits will be bitter as well. Cyberspace, information technology, is no different. And during the past decades, humans have put a lot of seeds for the internet, for cyberspace, for the super information highway. And now, with COVID-19, with our almost complete dependence on the internet and cyberspace, this is the time when humanity is fully reaping and harvesting what they planted and sowed before. So we're reaping the sweet and the bitter, the pros and the cons of the internet and of cyberspace. So what are these cons and what are the flaws of this cyberspace? What is cyberspace in the first place? And how can we be, subject to an attack on cyberspace? How can we stop that? To know the answers to these questions and more, I'm really delighted to be accompanied tonight by Rafiq Valiani, who is an information security specialist. It's a pleasure having you with us. And to start off, can you simply tell us what is cyberspace, or what is the super information highway?
Cyberspace is basically a huge network of hundreds of millions of computers and devices that are interconnected. They exchange information every day for the purposes of providing services such as websites, social media platforms, gaming networks, and just video conferencing services or banking and online shopping services. All these were not possible without having millions of computers talking to each other and being able to talk in one language so that they can exchange information safely and securely.
Today, the biggest fear and the biggest nightmare for any internet user on social media or for business or whatever is being hacked or for their page or site to be compromised. So what is the meaning of hacking? And is a hacker like a pirate? Is this a correct definition?
Absolutely. Hackers, pirates, thieves are just those words that we could use interchangeably for describing individuals with capabilities that allows them to access our systems, as in computers, our networks, our Wi-Fi, our routers, or even devices remotely, so that they can gain access to our information, to take over our devices and computers, or to use them to launch attacks against others. Think of them as just like a thief coming and hitting your home. They know everything about your home. They know how to unlock the doors, the windows. They've been trained, just like in any other discipline. People understand how things are designed, and likewise with hackers, they know how our systems are designed, our operating systems are designed, and they know how to then access them remotely. And later we'll be discussing what steps should be taken to prevent hackers from accessing the weaknesses in our systems.
Who is a hacker? And what are the practices or that a hacker would think of? What are the different steps a hacker would take in order to hack your page or site?
Professional hackers, those are well trained, they're part of an organized crime or a group of users who could access networks or computers. There's a full-time hacker that's their job is to just write or design emails that look very real, and they're sent to millions of people with enticing messages asking them to click a link or open an attachment. And by doing so, they are actually infecting their computers. So if there's a link, that link will take them to a website that will then download a malware to their computers or ask them to provide personal information or their account information and passwords, or just download an attachment that would then result in an infected computer. So one more thing I forgot to mention, phishing also can be through websites. So a website that is designed to resemble a legit website. So if there's an online banking site, for example, they would create a similar site, exactly same color, same branding, same everything, but has the wrong or a different address at the top. Emails and such websites have ways to, there are ways to identify if this is a phishing email or if this is a phishing website. So for emails, we usually start by inspecting the address, the sender. The sender usually has to be a legit sort of email. So if it's coming from a lawyer, it has to be from a lawyer's domain. So if it's, for example, ABC Lawyers or Laws at .com, it has to be from abclaw.com. It cannot be from 1234 at yahoo.com. This wouldn't be a lawyer's address. The second thing is to look how the email starts. Usually if it's addressed to me, they say, Dear Rafiq or Dear Mr. Valiani. But if it's just a spam, usually it would be then, Dear customer, Dear Rafiq Valiani, Dear Rafiq Valiani at some address, right? They don't know my full name, or they don't know my proper name. So they usually go by the email address, and because they have millions and millions of people in their databases, they won't call each and every person to ask for their full name, right? And then you will find typos in that email, or a message that doesn't make sense. You won a lottery, or your uncle in Nigeria died, or your uncle left you that many $1 million. Pay us $1,000 and we'll release the funds to you. And then you look at the signature, and usually it has to be, again, something that aligns to the sender's email address. So if it's a lawyer, you'll see the lawyer's full name, phone number, their address, and then so that you can call them and verify this information. If it's a website, phishing website, we have to examine the address, the URL at the top. For example, if we took TD Bank as an example, it should be td.com. If it is td1.com or tdbank.com, this is not their legit URL or banking address or the website address. We have to always examine those addresses and make sure that that small icon that looks like a lock, when we click on it, it has to match the same name on the URL, the first few words like td.com. This is what we call the domain name. And the certificate must mention that this is a legit name, and the certificate is usually then issued by what we call a reputable certificate authority, such as, say, Entrust or others. This is one way to look for a phishing email as a phishing site. Another one is if we are using a good antivirus application tool, it would also many times warn us that this is not a legit banking site. And then from there, they send us a warning or they display a warning, and then we can then reconsider proceeding with this website.
Okay, so a very dangerous practice that some people do is that they would clone a legitimate site. So it would look exactly the same, like the banking site or like Facebook maybe, or Instagram, whatever. It would look exactly the same, but we have to look at the URL, the domain name, and examine it letter by letter. So maybe they can replace a 1 with an L or an I. And if we were not very vigilant, really, we might not notice it. So we must really look carefully at that. Now, Wi-Fi networks is one of the ways that some people get hacked. So many people, when they go to a restaurant, to a cafe, a nightclub, or a hotel, or even, the airport, they might log into some open networks. How safe is this practice?
Open networks usually are not safe because it's open to everyone. So if I join an open network, an open Wi-Fi network at a restaurant or a hotel or at the airport, there are others as well on the same network. And many of them could be having sniffing tools, what we call a tool that looks and inspects traffic. And these tools are now very intelligent. They can identify a login ID and a password, and then this is what the user gets. And then from there, they can just access the same site just like us. So if we were at the airport accessing a banking site, we'd better be careful that our passwords and IDs should not be accessed by others. A good way of protecting it against, if we have to, the idea is if we have to access an open Wi-Fi network, it is always a good idea to use tools such as VPN, Virtual Private Network. And basically, it's a concept of creating sort of a tunnel between our device and the other site. And that tunnel allows for traffic to go in an encrypted form so that others on my network would not be able to read the data from between my device and the banking site. It's basically scrambled into a different text, zeros and ones, that are unreadable, except to the other side where it is then decrypted or descrambled, and then it comes back to the proper words and letters that we sent over the VPN channel.
How about like personal networks or like home Wi-Fi networks? Are they 100% leak-proof? Are there any cracks in the walls, or can we just use them with full comfort?
Wi-Fi networks, they offer lots of protection or encryption protocols. And day by day, there's a new method of breaking these encryptions. So the latest one that is out there, it's not the latest, but it's been common for the past few years now. It's called WPA2. WPA2 personal has not been compromised yet, except if you have very advanced tool that will allow you to decrypt the traffic. But for the general population, it's quite safe to use WPA2 at home and make sure all devices are configured to use long key. So you enable WPA2 and then choose a long password that then can be shared with others, and make sure it's only shared with family members or members of or people within our household, so that it's not shared with others, because once others know the password, they're able to access our network again.
Are there any other kinds of hacking that I did not mention that you'd like to shed some light on?
There are many ways of hacking, of course, and it starts with basically the hackers try to establish some sort of trust with them. So either they send you a very legit email or that phishing attempt, and then once we are able to download this malware, and some of the malware are basically what we call keyloggers, malware that just logs everything that you type. They're very intelligent, and they're able to see that once you go to, say, Amazon.com and then type in your ID and password, it would then segregate the word Amazon.com, your ID and your password, and then sends it to the hackers on the dark web so that they can sell this ID and password. Likewise with credit cards, you go to a site and you're entering your credit card information. Those malware are very smart. They can just identify, okay, that this is a credit card page. They pick up all the details and then send it again to the hackers. So with malware, you're able to then do other things as well, such as ransomware. In other words, scramble all the data that's on a computer, or in other words, encrypt it, and then demand a ransom so that you can get back to your data, or else you lost everything that you have. Unless you have a proper backup, you're unable to restore your data again. So this is another method of attack, and it's become very popular in the past year or two. And you may have heard, Muhammad, the health the healthcare industry is under attack. Hospitals and clinics, they've been attacked. Universities, of course, colleges, their systems are encrypted. Their data on their systems are encrypted, and if they don't pay the ransom, and usually they ask for 300 bitcoins. A bitcoin is expensive, and prices change, but it could be $5,000 a bitcoin. And then if the money is not paid, data is then published on the internet. So they've even tried to leverage the fear factor, so that if it's a hospital and it's got lots of personal information, they say if you don't pay it, we'll put this data on the web for free. So now the hospital is compelled to pay for the ransom.
Wow, it's it's really scary, but it's the truth. And we now know with COVID-19, with the shutdown, has there been an increase in the frequency of hacking? And are there new kinds of hacking that appeared recently with the shutdown?
Absolutely. We noticed an increase in spam emails and phishing attacks, all related to COVID. They try to take advantage of the fear and the concern that people have around COVID, and then they start to send emails, say, you want to know more about COVID, click on that link. And this is actually a link that will redirect you to an infected site, or has an attachment that has the latest information, and once you download it, again, you're infected. But even recently, there was another trick that they used, which is they used the heat map that was and that's available on Johns Hopkins Hospital's website. So they cloned that heat map and they infected it, and then they started to offer it to other websites to put it on their websites, and then just direct traffic there. And as a result, as soon as you hit the infected website or the infected map, not the Johns Hopkins ones, which is still intact and clean, is the other one. From their point onwards, your system is infected, and then from there they have access to either your information, or they use it for ransomware purposes, or to launch attack on other entities.
Now our neighbors to the south, during their last presidential elections, they had voting via snail mail or regular mail. But people are thinking in the most advanced countries, like Canada, of resorting to voting by email or through a website. Are we ready for this? Because, of course, once you put something on cyberspace, hacking always comes into the picture. Do you think we're ready for something like this for upcoming any elections?
Not in the near future, but I think there is a long-term strategy by the Canadian government to develop what we call the digital identity of a Canadian individual. And from there, they would establish what we call the trust model, and then use this to provide services to financial industries and other entities that require some level of assurance that this is actually that individual. And I believe this will evolve 100% to become the future trend for voting. It will require additional technologies, security technologies for sure, a very robust strategy to ensure the protection of information, insurance of identity, as well as secure transportation of information. So transport securely from one system to another. But I see this will be our next sort of move in the next 10 years, at least. Yeah.
Last but never least, what are the best practices to protect ourselves against hacking? I think there isn't something that that can prevent hacking altogether 100%. I don't think so. But what are the best ways for us to minimize the possibility of being hacked?
This is a very good question, Mohammed. And I think it goes back to what we call due diligence. So we have to always follow some of the good practices related to ensuring our Windows operating system or our mobile operating system is always up to date. Same applies to software. So our browsers, the Microsoft Office and other applications, they all should always be patched and kept up to date. And then, of course, when we're downloading a software, make sure we get it from the vendor. So don't download, say, Microsoft Office from a non-Microsoft website. Go to Microsoft.com and download it from there. And then, of course, when it comes to user IDs and password, we have to protect user IDs and passwords. Do not share passwords with others. Use long passwords. Use a different password for every site. I know some people will say, well, it's very difficult to remember passwords. You can always use a password manager. Password managers are software that are designed to identify which website you're going to, and it will fill in the right ID and password for that website. And it would even tell you if this password is being used on other sites. So it is just to warn you to make sure you use a different password for every site. Then, of course, very important is to use long passwords. Don't use short passwords. Use long passwords that are, say, minimum, 15 characters long. And then, like I said, password managers will help. And another important thing is to use multi-factor authentication, meaning I type in my ID, my password. So this is what I know. And if it's someone knows it, fine. There's another way. There's another information that I can provide, but it's something that I have in my hand. It's not in my head. That's what we call the authenticators, or a password that is sent to me via SMS. So I log in, so say Amazon.com, I type in my password, they will text me a code and I enter that code. And this code is valid for 1 minute and then it's gone. So this is a good way of ensuring that even if my password is leaked for any reason, the other person still cannot access, because that text message will come on my cell phone that I have in my hand. And then, of course, finally, if you have to write down the password, fine, write it down, but lock it. Make sure it's not accessible to anyone else. Final one is, of course, is to have always a good malware or antivirus software on your system. Those help against a lot of attacks. They will prevent us from going to some websites. They'll prevent us from installing some of the malicious software, and will make sure that if there's any unusual behavior on our computer, they're able to detect it and then let us know about it as well.
Well, Rafiq Valiani, the information security specialist and officer, thank you very much for being with us tonight and for all of the great information that you provided us with. Thank you very much again.
Thank you, Muhammad. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. And dear viewers, now we're suffering from COVID-19, and try to think of, hackers just like the viruses. Because a virus is a very microscopic, it's a microorganism that lives in the micro world that we don't really live in, we cannot see. Same thing as cyberspace. It's a space, but it's not a space it's a virtual space. It's a space that we cannot really live in or go inside. So again, viruses are mutant. They change their shapes and structure every time. So the more we develop vaccines and medications, the more severe and the more ferocious and fierce they become. Viruses always have this frenzy, of attacking us at any time. Same thing for hackers. So we always have to use up-to-date medications. We take the proper vaccines, and we've taken the vaccines before, we might always go and take a booster shot to renew the activity of the vaccine. Same thing is needed with our practices on cyberspace or with social media. Always renew your, software, always renew, anti-hacking like softwares that you have. Always take good care of where you keep your private information. Don't share it publicly and openly. Don't share it with your little child. Don't make it too easy to, guess. Just the same way that, I wouldn't go out in the cold with a sleeveless shirt. I'd always watch for the wind chill, for the frostbite in the winter. I'd always watch for the sun, for the UV index, and for a sunstroke in the summer. Same thing, I need to watch out for what I'm doing here. Like, I would not go in a public network that is shared by everyone and put my most critical information on my cell phone. Let's all watch out for these things, because probably, as they've said before many times, the new normal is probably here to stay. So we have to, live with it, and we have to change ourselves to be, suitable for the new world we're living in. Dear viewers, thank you very much for being with us tonight. Until we meet again, have a very pleasant evening.